Oh, hello there. Welcome to a very special episode of Game Over, where I talk about one of the most influential games of all time. No, it's not Super Mario Bros. Or Street Fighter 2 or even Final Fantasy, but rather the anti-drug masterpiece NARC. Released in the arcades in 1988 and then later on home consoles, this Williams classic is not only considered a masterclass in how to make a flawless run-and-gun shooter, but also sports what might just be the single greatest video game ending I've ever seen. Turn back now if you don't want to know what happens next, because today we're gonna spoil the story and ending for the arcade version of NARC. This is Game Over, the early years. In the long history of amazing, fully realized video game characters filled with subtle charisma and delicate nuance, few stand above Max Force and Hitman. These are two of the finest officers at the newly created Department of Narcotics Opposition. An elite police force that is designed to covertly infiltrate the druggy underworld and responsibly bring the evil kingpin Mr. Big to justice. Now, in case you're wondering, it's the far-flung future of 1997, and the decades-old war on drugs is at a tipping point. With dealers, pushers, gangsters, and even psycho clowns flooding the streets with uppers, downers, screamers, and laughers, only Max and Hit will be able to bring these criminals to justice. And with the entire budget going to military-style weapons and heavy ammo, our all-American heroes will take this opportunity to shoot, kill, and blow everybody up without even a whiff of a judge or jury. It's a deep and thought-provoking setup that makes a politically charged statement about the awesomeness of exploding criminals. Max and Hit do their thing through the slummy city streets and into the underground subway station, before finding a secret drug lab at the crack stop. Yeah, it's this kind of subtle in-joke that took NARC from being just another amazing arcade game and turned it into what many still consider to be the funniest game ever made. Ooh, and the yuck-yucks continue as we land our helicopter onto the bridge and start shooting flashers and trench coats. Apparently things have gotten so bad that completely filled garbage dumpsters prevent cars from going back or forth. Which I have to say is still a big improvement over the dumpster fire that is 2020. Unnecessary editorializing aside, our heroes eventually make their way to the part of town where adult video stores and theaters that show pornography line the streets. Because apparently the internet doesn't exist yet. It's here, below ground, where the creepy clowns attack, just like in that Tim Curry movie, It. Now, the genius of NARC is that it reminds you that smelly hippies need to die too. This is neither the time nor place to consider legalizing marijuana and using the tax money to fund important projects, because these bullets aren't gonna shoot themselves. Inside, the growing operation is surprisingly small and low-tech, but that's not gonna stop Max Force from taking a few plants home and sharing it with his friends. You know, this normally would be the point where most games would call it quits, fearing that they might have gone too far or something. But not NARC. One of the reasons why everybody continues to love this game is because the developers weren't afraid to push that envelope. This brings us to the game's biggest twist. Now that we've killed all the low-life scum in the poor parts of town, it's finally time to hit the snobby downtown streets where the wealthy hang out. As it turns out, somebody's bringing these awful drugs to the innocent rich people and forcing them to snort so much cocaine that they accidentally make too much money gambling on Wall Street. Thankfully, we put a stop to that. Oh, and speaking of good news, it's in this one city skyscraper where we find Crack's headquarters. It's a swanky building with iconic architecture and some of the most memorable level designs I've ever seen. It's in this long hallway where we find Mr. Big, a fat old guy in a wheelchair. We blow him up, and it's awesome. But what isn't awesome is what we find behind the locked door. It's here where we get a glimpse of the real villain, a massive human head attached to a Roomba. This is a horrifying fight that only gets worse as the human face turns into a skeleton, throwing out tongues. Thankfully, we managed to kill Mr. Big and unlock the secret room. With every drug dealer off the streets and the kingpin punished, it's time to collect our reward and watch what I guarantee is the very best ending you'll ever see. This is what happens next. Man, there's just something simple and elegant about that ending. From the flashing text to the reveal that this is just nothing more than a training mission, there's no question that this ending changed video games forever. It proves once and for all that you don't need to see a castle crashing in the distance to have a deep and emotionally satisfying conclusion. Guys, I'm gonna level with you. I've watched this ending dozens of times, and I still get choked up by the stirring writing and timeless message. Few games will ever come close to what NARC has achieved here. Now, what makes this ending so much more effective is that it's not just a simple congratulations screen, it's also a call to action. Now that you've shot, killed, and exploded every single drug dealer you could find, it's your job, nay, duty, to contact your local DEA recruiter and demand to be placed on the front lines of the war on drugs. Tell them that you want to shoot every single pusher in the city, even if that means firing a literal rocket in their face. Oh, and if they look at you funny and threaten to call the cops, then you remind them that it's April Fool's and you were only joking. Yeah, that's it. It was all a big joke. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Game Over, the early years. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new episodes every week. And usually they're a lot more serious than this one. Now, here's the question I have for you. Has NARC inspired you to become a DEA agent? And actually, has any video game inspired you to get a certain job? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, we'll return to our non-April Fool's coverage tomorrow, when we'll probably have a review of Wingia, followed by a lot more stuff. And who knows, maybe I'll finally get around to updating you on what's going on with the channel, quarantine, and everything else. If you're into that, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,